We've been waiting for a product with all-day battery life for literally years. This is the ASUS NovaGo. Does it deliver? Yes and no. This is the ASUS NovaGo, the first generation of a new class of devices. ACPCs, or always connected PCs. Now, pretty much every product we've ever tested has been evaluated on price and performance, literally bang for the buck. With this, we're starting a new direction. We're talking about battery for the buck, and we're wondering how much performance we're willing to sacrifice for it. Now, really, the ASUS NovaGo doesn't seem like there's anything really special about it, but the key, or at least one of the first clues, is this little sticker right down here that says Qualcomm Snapdragon. This doesn't have a Core processor or even an AMD processor inside it. This has a Qualcomm Snapdragon processor, the same processor that may be inside your cell phone. So what makes this special? Again, all-day battery life. Now, the idea behind an ACPC is that you're going to be able to work wherever you want and always remain connected, either via Wi-Fi or via a cell phone chip, which is actually inside of it. Now, again, the specs on this are pretty mundane, and again, you're really looking at this, there's really nothing that says this is anything special. It has a 13.3-inch LED screen. It has full sRGB capabilities, 1920 by 1080, so nothing really special there. It has 8 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs SSD inside of it. And again, the key thing here is the processor, a 2.2 gigahertz Snapdragon 835. Now that doesn't mean a whole lot to you in terms of numbers and so forth. We'll get into the performance a little bit later. But we can also say that this has an 802.11ac 4x4 MIMO chip inside of it. So again, great connectivity indoors and outside. So we're sort of in a transitional state between USB-A and USB-C. And with this machine, ASUS looks backward. So on this side, we have the power connection, and we have two USB-A 3.0 ports. So enough to connect legacy peripherals. This side, though, is a bit more interesting. So you have the power switch, the volume rocker, the mic, but you also have HDMI, which is quite handy for connecting to an external monitor, and the kicker, the SIM slot. Now, the SIM slot also doubles as the micro SD card slot as well. So if you pop this out with a little paper clip or some other tool, you will see that only you can put in a micro SIM, but you can also put in a micro SD cards as well. Now, the price is actually an interesting question too. Late in our review, we were told that this is actually not going to be the configuration that ships in the United States. Again, this is an 8 gig, 128 gig machine. What we're going to see from ASUS at the end of May is a 4 gig machine and a 64 gig SSD. That's actually going to take the performance down probably just a tad. And as we're going to find out later, the performance isn't great to begin with. So that particular product will be priced at $599, which isn't that bad for a product of that sort. But again, you're going to have to factor in cell phone costs as well. Now, a couple of other interesting features about this. It has a 720p camera on the front. It's not Windows Hello capable, but it does have a little fingerprint reader here on the front, right next to the touchpad. And the fingerprint reader works quite well. It's fast. One of the selling points of this is that you can close it up and bring it back and be really working within just a couple of seconds. And the fingerprint reader works pretty well. I find that I have to touch it a couple of times, but you know, again, it is quick, and you can get into a work environment very quickly. I have to say that I'm not that impressed with the keyboard. I've never really been that impressed with ASUS keyboards. They're always a little bit shallow. They don't have as much of a springiness, as much springiness as I would like. And they're also not backlit either. I mean, again, if you want all-day battery life, you can't be wasting lumens trying to light up the keyboard. So you're going to have to take that into consideration. Speaking of all-day battery life and working, the display only outputs 278 nits, and with that, that's not quite enough to work in full sunlight. So when I was working testing this out in various places. I did take it out to the park and found that I couldn't actually work on a picnic table. I had to go into the shade to work it. So again, from a hardware standpoint, this is a solid machine. It's not an outstanding machine, but the real selling point is what you can do with it. Now let's talk a little bit about what makes this an always connected PC. So again, this does not come with a SIM. You have to supply your own. The nice thing is that it seemed to work with just about anything I threw at, which, to be honest, was just two. Qualcomm shipped us a T-Mobile SIM, which I included and tested it out with, but I also had a Verizon SIM as well. And T-Mobile is an excellent carrier, but the connectivity on Verizon is just a little bit better. I did find that when I was out and about, T-Mobile and Verizon worked well as far as connecting in the Bay Area. T-Mobile has a tendency to get a little bit congested though on the BART trains that I take into San Francisco, so Verizon was a superior solution there. However, throughput was excellent on both. On Verizon at least, I got connectivity downstream connectivity of about 9 megabits to all the way to 118 megabits downstream, and 8.3 megabits maximum upstream. On both of those, there was enough bandstream and available to go. There's enough bandwidth available to download a 1080p video with no problem. So if you're out and about working, I don't think there's going to be any problems in getting done what you need to get done. So the battery in the ASUS NovaGo isn't really anything to speak of. It's only 38.5 watt hours, but the Qualcomm Snapdragon chip inside it just sips power. Now to test the battery life, we loop a video over and over and over until the battery expires. And normally we see 8, 9, 10 hours. With this, we saw 17 hours, 22 minutes. That's just extraordinary. That's far beyond anything we've seen, say, with the Surface Book 2, which has a battery in the top and in the base. With this, there's just a battery in the base. And for whatever reason, because of that Qualcomm chip, it just keeps going and going and going. If you want an always connected PC, the ASUS NovaGo delivers. So let's talk about performance, which was where things start to go south a little bit. And when we talk about, before we talk about performance, we have to talk a little bit about the concessions that we're going to have to make in using this particular machine. Because this uses a Qualcomm chip inside of it, you're going to suffer somewhat on performance and app choice. But where you're going to start, though, is with the operating system. Normally, you get a PC with Windows 10 Home or Windows 10 Pro inside it. With this, you're getting Windows 10S. And Windows 10S only allows you to run apps from the Microsoft Store. So, for example, no Cuphead, no Forza. Some of the apps that you're used to using, like Chrome, won't run on this. Now, we got a machine actually with Windows 10 Pro preloaded on it. And of course, that's a bit problematic because of the fact that you're not getting necessarily the true experience. However, you do have a little bit more flexibility. One interesting thing is that the battery life actually goes up with Windows 10S. So the 17 hours, 22 minutes we quoted probably will be a little bit more. But again, let's talk a little bit about performance and so forth. So we already wrote that we can't run every app that you want because of Windows 10S. But you can't run every app that you want, including 64-bit apps. Most every operating system and chip in the world is a 64-bit chip and a 64-bit OS, but it's not supported yet on this. So not only can you not run apps outside the Windows Store, you can't run 64-bit apps. So what's a 64-bit app? I can't tell you. Well, I can tell you with looking at something, but you won't be able to know until you actually start loading something. And what you'll get is an error message saying you simply can't load that app. Which is frustrating because the fact that you're going to end up with apps that you think you can run, but you can't, and apps that you might not know that you can run. Adobe Photoshop works great. Minecraft for Windows 10, sure, it works well. Minecraft for Java, it doesn't load. So it's kind of a crapshoot, and that's where things are going to get a little bit confusing. Now, the third aspect of it is the fact that anything that's written for a core chip is going to be emulated. And emulated means that it's going to be translated and the performance is going to drop somewhat. So again, you're going to load an app from the Windows Store. You're not going to know necessarily, unless you start looking in the description, whether it's written for ARM or whether it's written for Core. And if it's written for the Core processor, even if it runs, it's going to run a little bit slower. So I can give you an interesting example that I did using Windows 10 Pro. And I think the fact that most people prefer to use Chrome as their browser is going to be a real tripping point, a real stumbling block for something like this. So on this machine with Windows 10 Pro, I ran Chrome. And then I compared it to Edge. And then I compared it to Chrome with ad blockers enabled, which is what most people actually do. And the interesting thing is that on this, Windows 10 Edge, which sometimes can run pretty slow on a normal machine, is actually the fastest browser. And then Windows 10 Chrome without ad blockers ran pretty well. And then Windows 10 Chrome with ad blockers ran the slowest of all, because not only is Chrome emulated, and this is my guess, but those ad blockers are too. So that experience is going to be sort of the opposite of what you would get on a normal PC. So if you love Edge, heck, this is the machine for you. If you love Chrome, you might want to think about something else. Now, the other thing to think about is the fact that on this machine, this was a Windows 10, not only was it Windows 10 Pro, it was a Windows 10 Pro Insider machine. So one of the things that Qualcomm recommended for us is that we load the Insider build, which is a beta build. And what that tells us is that performance is going to increase over time. In fact, this is a little bit like a Chromebook, in that Google always tells you with a Chromebook that things are going to improve. And it's true for this, that things are going to improve as well. In fact, at Build, we know that Microsoft is going to debut a preview SDK, which is going to allow 64-bit apps to run on this. But when that's going to happen, when that's going to load, when that's going to be available to you, are all questions that I can't answer. So what this means is that if you like testing out software, if you like testing out hardware, if you like Insider builds, and you want a machine that has all-day battery life, sure, buy the Asus NovaGo. This is a machine for you. And in fact, for me, it actually does a lot of it what I like to do. I go ahead and I use it all the time. But I know that things are going to be a little bit slow, things are going to be a little bit buggy, and things are not always going to run well. So if you want a machine that just works, don't buy the Asus NovaGo. But if you want a machine that probably will work in a year, maybe in the next generation, then yeah, go with something else. So I don't think we can say anything definitive about the Qualcomm 835 or the ACPC or the future of this platform quite yet. It has potential. It has potential today. But again, if you want a PC that just works, don't buy the Asus NovaGo.